Hey, what's up? This is Zach here at the Stable event in San Francisco. Super excited to be speaking with CJ. Today we're going to be talking about the future of stables at Amity Ventures. Is that correct?
Yeah, Amity Ventures.
Amity Ventures. Amazing. Can you talk to us a little bit about, before we get into it, your role at Amity and sort of what you guys do in the stable space?
Yeah, absolutely. So Amity Ventures, we were started, our first fund was in 2018. So my co-founder, Patrick, and I have been working, I guess, in and around both the crypto world and the software world. So we kind of straddle a little bit of both in terms of how we organize our time. And we've been working in those worlds since back to 2011, 2012. We used to work at a firm called Highland Capital Partners. We've now built out Amity. We're based in the Presidio here locally in San Francisco. Team's about 12. We're, I guess, specific to stables, we are a partner of Kevin and team at Borderless. So we led their round, who's helping organize this event. Things that we're excited about in crypto and in the stable world in general, most of our work happens to be kind of on the equity side, actually working with founders. So Amity means quality relationships. And the way that we kind of parse and evaluate working with entrepreneurs is really taking a human-driven approach. So we have some things that are in the token world. Most of our stuff's in the equity world, but it always comes to the human thesis.
Can you talk a little bit about that human thesis?
Yeah. So I think, people sometimes make this claim or statement that ideas are a commodity, right? We're here at this stable event. There's many people that all have similar ideas in terms of value proposition, in terms of the stablecoin sandwich. We're going to help just people send money faster, make it cheaper, all really valuable things. But the way that you organize those things and stitch them together as an entrepreneur, the way that you construct that business, the nuances of the business development effort, the sales effort, all of the different parts that have to go together are going to be organized by a human who's at the head of that operation or that company. And so I think when we look at the most successful businesses, they normally are run by founders that have some asymmetric insight into what they were doing. And so in Kevin's specific example, the asymmetric insight, his background at both Prime Trust and Fortress, he was on the technical side of organizing some of the largest money movements in crypto, and had a front row seat to a lot of its evolution over the last 5 to 10 years. And so you take that human being and you take a problem space that they saw so intimately and they saw so closely, and you help them organize now what needs to be built inside of it, which is this network of networks really inside of stablecoins. And that's how he's coming ahead and building out at Borderless. That's just an example or a thesis of other things that might exist across our portfolio, that kind of boils down to that entrepreneur, their insights, their unique background, to really head the category defining companies.
No, that's fascinating. I mean, and for our viewers, it's so cool to get that direct insight from someone who's really making those decisions. So I really appreciate that, because I think a lot of people think it's just a stat sheet, and so I think that having that human perspective is really important. And that kind of brings us to the event that we're at today. We're here all in person in San Francisco. What do you think is the biggest value to having these sort of in-person events, especially for VCs?
Oh, biggest value for in-person events for VCs. I think if I believe, which I do, that the venture capital industry is a human business, it's a relationship-driven business, you have to get to know the people that are making the decisions. You can read as many decks as you want to read. You can listen to all the stats. I think if you think about a spectrum of, at the earliest stage, it's a pre-seed investor who's helping people start companies, all the way through a publicly traded large business. If you think about that spectrum, it becomes a lot more about the numbers as you have this large publicly traded business. But I think I would even argue that it's very important to still understand the people at the helm. Numbers are just a very relevant part of the story. If you go down to the earliest stage, the numbers don't really exist. And so how do you get to know the people making the decisions and building the businesses? It's through events like these. It's through understanding what customers want, which you can meet at places like these. And so rather than doing a bunch of one-off meetings, an event like this helps organize a bunch of people together. Both are important, but it kind of turns into a melting pot and mixing pot of people with shared interests.
And I think you mentioned some green flags that you see in founders, the background, for example. Sure. What are like some maybe red flags that you've seen where you're like, okay, this looked like something's good, but maybe we're not going to take the chance, or it wasn't quite the right fit, Yeah,
I mean, there's the obvious there that, there's just people that sometimes aren't building great businesses, and you sometimes get a perspective around that. Maybe more uniquely, I think we have human characteristics that we sometimes index on that just aren't a fit for us. There may be examples out there, but I've never worked with a successful CEO that moves slowly. That takes a long time to text you back, that takes a long time to work on the important thing. And so some sense of velocity has really become kind of important to us, or an important filter for the people that we have really married well with. We like to say that we invest in unadulterated capitalists, so people that are figuring out a way to maximize their impact on the world and use the beauty of capitalism to create something very powerful and important. And really, the way that they're creating value is through the importance of their work and the impact that it's having on others.
So well said.
And so if you organize those things together, I think you highlight both green flags and red flags, though, right? The red flags end up being the opposites.
And kind of, looking at events like this and the different panels, I've noticed that there's a lot of focus on emerging markets. And I know we're here in the US. What is kind of your perspective on the adoption happening in emerging markets for stables?
Yeah, I think our personal perspective, or my personal perspective, and a little bit of our perspective at Amity and with some of the companies we've worked with, some of the things that we're starting to see is, I think stables, there's this element here, but they're being kind of pulled into a more dominant a more dominant commercial application in emerging markets because of a lot of the inefficiency that exists inside a traditional financial system is really magnified in emerging markets. And so you mix infrastructure and then you mix human decisions. So in stablecoins, you're trusting computers instead of trusting humans. And what I mean by that, and this is just crypto in general, trusting computers versus trusting businesses, many emerging markets where you're seeing the most stable adoption have dynamic governments, dynamic currencies, and low per capita GDP. That means that the humans are not making the best decisions for them. And so if you're able to go trust other humans, trust the US dollar, humans that are making decisions in a different environment, and you're able to trust computers through a different medium of exchange, such as stablecoins, those two things I think are why you're really seeing the fire light under emerging markets as a large adoption center for stablecoins. And so some of the content on the panel today, people were talking about the actual evolution of emerging markets and what they were seeing in terms of stablecoin adoption. And they were kind of wrestling with this Pax Americana versus technology, but I think it's the mix of both that's coming together to really drive that, and why you're seeing the excitement in emerging markets.
And I've been asking all of the different interviewees here, what do you think is the biggest misconception around stablecoins?
I've made the joke, and this is, but there's 147 of them, so which one's best, right? They're not so stable.
Yeah, yeah.
We got the 15% DPEG, and so I think Sam said it well in some of the content today, but I think trying to overcomplicate it becomes a big misconception. I think understanding how they're backed, understanding what the actual value proposition is. For these businesses to operate, there's typically still transaction fees, but they settle faster, right? And so where is that premium? Like, how are these businesses actually organizing? It's not as simple to just operate in stablecoins. There's a very complex landscape right now in terms of vendors.
ML.
All of these things are still important, right? So you have a medium of exchange or a transfer mechanism, something that's happening, and the industry is still maturing across those. So this idea that you just go straight, I think biggest misconception I would summarize then is this idea that you go straight to some other world of stablecoins and it all just works. It's actually kind of a mix. It's a melting pot. I think if you take other platform shifts that have happened in the world, if you take on-premise to cloud, or if you take the emergence of mobile, if you look at AI, what's happening right now, AI is being integrated into every other software. Mobile became integrated into every software. I think you're going to see this melting pot of stable coins becoming infrastructure and backbones and everything traditional. And so the traditional financial infrastructure is going to evolve to adopt this better technology. It's not necessarily this black and white other world of stable coins.
I agree. And I think that's the thing. It's like Web 3 and Web 2. Someday it's just going to be the internet. It's just going to be, it's just the web. That's a great way to put it. What are you most excited about in terms of innovations that you've seen in the last 6 months in the stablecoin space?
I think I'm most excited about customer adoption, and I think I get most excited. We spend a lot of our time actually talking to customers and working with people who are working with our companies or working with prospects that we might be evaluating.
Like an actual payee, someone who uses stablecoins, or
like an example would be a bank who is looking to potentially adopt it. Okay. And maybe we have a portfolio company, maybe we don't, but we want to understand their problems and their needs, understand which entrepreneurs we might want to introduce them to, how they're thinking about problem statements. And I think I get most excited in some of those conversations when a non-obvious use case or value proposition really emerges from that conversation. where, and I'll give an example. We were, on the phone, Kevin at Borderless and ourselves, we were on the phone with a large, deca-billion-dollar book value bank a few weeks ago. And some of the value proposition that they see out of stablecoin potential is with international wires. And let's break down the experience of an international wire and the business model of the bank. It could take 3 to 7 days to settle. It disappears at some point. You don't really know where it is. No one can really track it.
Crazy.
Which is kind of crazy.
And you don't know how much fees you're paying maybe until after you've sent it.
So what do a ton of people do is they pick up the phone and call their bank and say, where's my wire? And the bank says, I don't know, it can take a while. And they kind of reassure you. And if there's a large wire like that, so they have a whole infrastructure of a lot of people that end up answering that question. That's a major cost center for the bank. The customer service of where's my international wire? Well, stablecoins, like there's other, the SWIFT network operates during business hours or during bank hours. SEPA in the EU operates 24/7, 365. Well, stablecoins and a proper network that can sit in between them could enable near instant settlement. Settle within an hour. Those customer service costs go away. We didn't talk about making it cheaper. We didn't talk about doing anything besides integrating these networks better. And that's a totally different value proposition back to that bank on the cost center and the customer experience and the feeling a customer has working with that bank.
How great would it be? Oh, I'm sending you the money. You'll be there in 10 minutes in your bank account in Mexico, in India, in wherever, in the Philippines. Totally.
And just the business ramification of that on the customer service side or customer success side and the brand affiliation or brand impact that'll have back to that bank.
How important do you think, I guess, like retail adoption of stablecoins is in this larger ecosystem of adoption? Or do you think it really will always be the sort of thing where I'm getting my stables, I'm converting it to fiat, and I'm going and buying my groceries, a car, whatever? Or do you think that in the ideal world or the future, it is going to be a thing where it's all within stables from the second you put in fiat to that's it? Like once you put in your fiat, you're done. You don't ever need to get it back out.
Yeah, if I open up my digital currency exchange account on my phone and I look at how much USDC I have or something, the big number at the top is a number of dollars USD, not denominating the stablecoin. And so I think if I play this forward, the retail user just cares they've got that USD and that they can do whatever they want to do with it. They don't care what the underlying denomination or structure is, but they want it to be as efficient as possible. They don't want to pay extra fees. They want it to be nimble. They want it to be secure. They want all of these things that a blockchain can help provide and that stablecoins can help provide. But I think the best products will start to obfuscate that away and just deliver a better experience based on the fundamentals of stablecoins rather than playing some tribalism on the identity of which stablecoin or what actual use case it is. They're just going to care that they've got their coin, not necessarily what's under the hood.
Do you think most stablecoin companies realize that?
I think a lot. I don't know if I could say most or speak on behalf of most, but I think a lot of the most compelling entrepreneurs that I have the pleasure of speaking with stick to a very simple value proposition for their customer or their consumer that acknowledges that reality on a 5-year plus horizon. And they're building their products to deliver the value endemic to stablecoins to their customers through creating the best experiences for them, not necessarily building their products to try and have, and sometimes they have some tribalism because maybe they started a stablecoin themselves. They're trying to make it more popular, but they're trying to make it more popular by creating an experience that competes with other experiences, right?
Why do you think events like this, I mean, we kind of talked about this earlier, but are so key, even as we kind of get more and more into a virtual world?
Yeah, I think you have a little bit of this oscillation, but I just don't think, as bags of bones sitting here, I don't think there's anything that replicates the human interaction and human experience. The ability to have
every VC has said that to me today.
Yeah.
So interesting. And most people watching probably don't know that. That's how you think about things. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you think about it from the perspective of just here's the numbers and here's, but if you think about it, the people that are making the decisions, then you have to understand them. And so I guess for me, at least my personal way that I do business, and there's many different ways to do venture capital. And there's many different ways that have been successful in doing venture capital. But just the way that has worked for us at Amity is by building quality relationships with people at all parts of the ecosystem and the stack and finding the groups that make the most sense to partner with.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, CJ, for this awesome interview. I
Yeah.
really appreciate it. And
Cool.
I encourage everyone watching to follow them on X and learn more about what they're investing in and their thoughts on this industry. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Pleasure to be here.
Amazing.
Yep.